NASA says its Voyager 1 probe, the most distant human-made object in the universe.
Biggest, strangest mystery in all the universe at the present time. Wow. These are called fast radio bursts.
There are moments in human history when the world seems to hold its breath, when everything familiar suddenly tilts and you're left staring into the unknown. For decades, we've looked at the stars and imagined the silence meant emptiness, that no one was out there, that we were alone. But what if the silence wasn't silence at all, just a whisper too faint to hear? Until now. It began like any other day at NASA. Routine data, standard pulses from the edge of everything. Voyager 1, the lonely wanderer we launched in 1977, was still out there, still alive, barely. Its signal had grown so faint that even the most sensitive antennas struggled to catch it. And yet, it kept speaking, steadily, faithfully, like an old lighthouse flickering in a storm no one else could see. No one expected anything new. Voyager had done its job, sent back its wonders, and was now coasting through interstellar space like a message in a bottle, forgotten by time. But then, something changed. The AI watching the data streams, sophisticated, emotionless, tireless, caught it first. A strange pattern, a break in rhythm, a deviation so subtle no human would have seen it. At first, engineers thought it was noise, static, the product of an aging machine drifting alone for nearly half a century. But the AI disagreed. It flagged the signal, not for corruption, but for structure, intent. There was something deliberate in the way the data pulsed, something layered, as if beneath the hum of the usual systems update, there was a message. They ran it through everything: compression tools, translation models, legacy encoding systems Voyager used in the 1970s. And buried inside was an image, not a photograph, nothing that could be captured by a lens. This was something else, something made of mathematics and precision, an image constructed like a puzzle, one that only made sense when all the pieces were finally understood. What emerged on screen left the room in stunned silence. Against a pitch-black background, an eternal void unlit by any star, stood a shape. Sharp, symmetrical. Not a random cluster of pixels, not a distant galaxy or a trick of cosmic dust. This was a form, a design, a lattice-like structure illuminated faintly from within, almost pulsing as if alive. It looked built, not by nature, but by choice. People froze, not out of fear, but something deeper. That quiet, terrifying awe that rises when everything you thought was impossible suddenly isn't. They had sent us something back. Someone, somewhere, had seen our message and answered. It was Michio Kaku, the brilliant and ever-curious physicist, who was one of the first to speak publicly. Not with wild claims or reckless excitement, but with a grave, almost reverent calm. The AI, he said, had confirmed that the signal didn't match natural origins. It was too perfect, too clean, too knowing. And perhaps most chilling of all, it used Voyager's own language. You see, Voyager wasn't designed for two-way conversations. It sends data, status reports, memories of Earth captured in code. It doesn't wait for answers. It can't. Its transmissions are barely whispers, thin threads of radio stretched over billions of miles. But somehow something had heard that whisper, and it replied. It didn't speak in English, or numbers, or sound. It replied with form, with logic, with a visual language that echoed back our own systems of information. Not just binary, but patterns that hinted at something far more complex. Trinary code, recursive designs, elements that mirrored the symmetry we ourselves use to make sense of the universe. It was like being handed a mirror from the other side of forever. Kaku warned that while machines could confirm structure and intelligence, they couldn't tell us intent. Was it a greeting, a test, a warning, or something else entirely? The image gave no answers, just questions layered inside questions, each more haunting than the last. Then came the second shock. Embedded within the image, buried in its very fabric, was a map. Not one made of stars or constellations, but of gravitational anomalies, points of invisible influence mapped by Earth's own deep space instruments. For years, these had been considered noise, strange movements in the cosmos we couldn't explain. But now, they had context. The image was pointing to them, marking them, connecting them, as if showing us a network we hadn't known we were part of. And that's when fear crept in. What if Voyager hadn't just stumbled upon this? What if it had been expected, watched? What if someone, had been listening all along, waiting patiently for our little machine to cross an invisible threshold? And when it did, they answered. Not with noise, not with chaos, but with clarity. For a moment, the people in that room weren't scientists or engineers. They were children, staring up at a night sky that suddenly blinked back. The silence of deep space, once thought eternal, now felt like the pause before a voice. And that voice had begun to speak. No one knew what would happen next. The AI continued analyzing. The data kept flowing. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of any telescope, something had opened its eyes. News of the signal didn't spread the way a discovery like this should. It didn't erupt into headlines or spark press conferences. It crept quietly, cautiously, through scientific circles. Behind closed doors, debates flared. Was it real? A fluke? A misinterpretation of data warped by distance and time? But as the image was verified, reanalyzed, and decoded again through independent systems, the truth became harder to ignore. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't random. Every time the data was parsed, it told the same story. Down to the smallest pulse, the finest line, the image held. The lattice remained. And within its geometry, the message waited. For every skeptic, another scientist came forward with their own confirmation. Error correction patterns were identified. Metadata pointed to versioning, as if the transmission wasn't just a moment, but part of a larger sequence. And deep within, a familiar echo emerged. Voyager's own signal, folded into the reply. It was like hearing your own voice in a crowd, but changed, reflected back from someone else's mouth. That echo sent chills through even the most hardened engineers. It wasn't just recognition, it was mimicry, a direct response, a subtle, eerie acknowledgement that they had heard us clearly enough to speak in our tongue. Michio Kaku didn't blink when he was asked what it meant. He leaned forward and said, "It's the cosmic equivalent of a handshake. Not a scream, not a threat, just a gesture, a reply from the dark." And yet that reply raised even deeper questions. If they could understand our signal, how long had they been listening? Voyager left our solar system years ago, pushing past the heliopause and into true interstellar space. It wasn't transmitting an invitation. It wasn't searching for life. It was broadcasting its fading heartbeat, a low-power beacon announcing, "I am here." And now something had replied not with words, but with a structure, a map, a mirror. What chilled the soul wasn't the communication itself. It was the implication that we were not alone in our curiosity, that someone else was not just watching, but waiting. And if they were capable of receiving and decoding Voyager's whisper, were we the only ones being studied? As researchers pored over the vector image, the patterns became harder to dismiss. What once looked abstract now took on deliberate meaning. The symmetrical formations weren't just aesthetically balanced, they echoed the logical layouts of information systems. Layers of repeating elements, recursive sequences, and something else. Something no one could quite name. Some called it aesthetic logic. Others described it as mathematical beauty. But whatever it was, it felt intentional. It didn't look like a machine. It looked like something made by minds. Minds that understood not just function, but form. Minds that knew how to communicate not just data, but thought, culture, article. And then came the pulses. After the image, the signal changed. The steady rhythm of Voyager's old data was interrupted by a new sequence, one the AI called instructive. It was like watching someone knock on a locked door, not with force, but with purpose. Tap, 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 tap. Not random, regular, rhythmic, meaningful. The pulses weren't just timing signals. They contained structure, modulated frequencies that resembled linguistic scaffolding, the kind used to teach, to translate. It wasn't a message in the conventional sense. It was a framework, a pattern that might allow us to understand something bigger. And with that, a new wave of dread began to ripple through the scientific community. Because patterns like this, layered, recursive, guided, don't just happen. They're designed. And if this was a lesson, what were we being taught? More importantly, why now? Kaku's voice took on a darker edge in interviews. This is not just a signal, he said. This is a dialogue starter, and dialogues imply intent. But intent? From whom? Was this a civilization, an intelligence, a machine born from another world, trained to respond to beacons like ours? Or was this something older, something beyond even our concept of civilization? No one knew. But the haunting part was that whatever it was, it had responded with silence after the image and the pulses. No further transmissions followed, just emptiness, like the breathless pause between one word and the next. And yet, it wasn't a dead silence. It was a waiting one, as if the voice on the other end had spoken, and now it waited to see if we could respond, as if it were testing our curiosity, our patience, our readiness. The golden record aboard Voyager, the one meant for alien eyes, had always felt symbolic, a time capsule, a gesture. But now it felt like something more, like a question finally being answered, or worse, like a door finally being opened. If Voyager was a key, then something had just turned the lock. There were those who said we should send something back, a reply, an acknowledgement. But others warned against it. "We're not ready," one scientist said. "We don't even know who we're talking to." And that's the truth no one wants to admit. We don't know. All we have is an image, a shape in the dark, a signal too perfect to ignore, a response built from our own voice. We've knocked on the star, and someone just knocked back. There's a strange kind of silence that follows a revelation. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of knowing something has changed forever. That's where the world finds itself now, suspended in the aftershock of a cosmic reply that came without warning, without explanation, and without promise. Voyager 1 continues its lonely drift through interstellar space, still transmitting its fragile signals. But now, every data packet it sends is treated like scripture. Every pause, every flicker in the transmission is dissected with trembling urgency. Because somewhere out there, beyond everything we thought we understood, something is listening. And maybe it always was. NASA's systems remain locked on the probe, AI tools constantly scanning for another image, another pulse, another clue. But for now, the stream remains unchanged. That lattice-like structure, the reply we weren't expecting, remains Voyager's final gift, a window into the possibility that we are not alone, that we were never alone. Michio Kaku took to the airwaves again, this time with a quiet intensity that even he rarely shows. He spoke not as a physicist, but as a human being grappling with something larger than equations. "We always thought we were the watchers," he said, "but now we have to ask, were we the watched?" His words echoed a fear few dared to articulate. If someone replied to Voyager, then they must have been waiting. And if they were waiting, for how long? Did they watch us when Voyager first left Earth? Did they hear our songs, our languages, our hopes pressed into a golden disc and sent into the void? Did they understand them? Did they understand us? Or were they waiting for something else entirely? It's no longer just a question of whether there's life beyond Earth. It's a question of whether that life has already categorized us, understood us, maybe even judged us. The image wasn't threatening. It didn't show weapons or warnings, but it didn't comfort either. It didn't reach out with open arms. It stood still and quiet, like a sentry in the dark. We don't know what it means, and maybe that's what's most terrifying. Humanity now stands in the shadow of a response we didn't ask for, but desperately hoped for. We always imagined that contact with another intelligence would come with clarity, with enlightenment. But what if it comes first with uncertainty? What if the first contact is not a conversation, but a question? The pulse that followed the image, still not fully decoded, might be that question. a test, a doorway, a message designed to measure not our technology, but our understanding. Are we capable of reading it? Of interpreting something that was never meant to comfort us, but to challenge us? That's what Voyager has become now. Not just a relic, but a bridge. A symbol of our first step into something far more immense than space travel. Into connection, into responsibility, into the terrible and beautiful truth that someone may be watching, waiting to see what we'll do next. Governments are cautious, scientists are divided, some advocate for sending a reply, others insist we should remain silent until we understand more. But in the back of every mind, across every continent, lingers the same quiet thought. What if they're still watching? What if this is just the beginning? We built Voyager in a time of rotary phones and Cold War tension. We built it with hope, with music, with the voice of a child saying, "Hello from the children of planet Earth." We launched it not knowing if anyone would ever hear it. And someone did. What they heard, what they understood, that's the part we still don't know. But one thing is certain. The universe is no longer silent. Its darkness is no longer empty. It has blinked back. It has whispered in return. And now we must decide who we are in the face of that whisper. This isn't science fiction anymore. This isn't a story about distant stars and far-off futures. This is happening. Now in our lifetime, the cosmos has shifted. A door has opened. And standing at the edge of that door is a single aging machine, still transmitting, still carrying our voice, still holding the line between us and the unknown. Voyager is no longer just a probe. It's a question mark burning through the stars. And somewhere on the other side of that question is someone else. We don't know what comes next. We don't know if there will be another image, another signal, another response. But we do know one thing. We are being seen. And maybe, just maybe, we are being invited to see back.